quorum present. I'm calling this meeting to order. We have an echo.
Yeah, we do.
Somebody has a microphone on. Okay, so we will start with number 1. I called the meeting to order. Number 2, public comments. I see no one. Anyone in the,
Mr. Harris.
we have,
Hand up.
okay, any, public comments? Is there a hand up? Which one? I can't see.
Yes.
Oh, Supervisor Harris, go ahead.
Hi, Supervisor Harris, address 316 and a half North 3rd Street, Wausau, Wisconsin. Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to make a quick public comment, a couple quick comments. One on the action coming up for the RFP. I would just add to that to make sure that we, the consultant looks at different funding alternatives and options, because that's one of the main obstacles to transportation, and also in terms of the different options in terms of getting, feedback, that a specific portion be dedicated to looking at different stakeholders like businesses within that report, if that's something that the council moves on with this RFP. The other thing I just wanted to make the council aware of, if they're not, Rib Mountain recently, there's an article in the Pilot and Review about Rib Mountain seeking input regarding businesses and how to deal with sort of making sure that these businesses continue to be viable. And so that might be an area that we may want to, that the committee may want to explore in terms of providing some input. The input would have to be made, I think there's a public hearing on it on March 25th. They're looking for input from businesses and other entities regarding moving forward on that end in terms of businesses and how to get people to them. Well, one way would be obviously transportation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Go ahead. We have one more. Hang on.
Hello, Deborah Ryan, 702 Elm Street. I had a chance to do some Google searches, and I guess I'd like to find out more about what we plan to do RFP-wise, so that we're not necessarily dragging out some things that could be done fairly quickly. I did look online, and there's using a GPS, having a way to track different fleet vehicles. And I had thought, for the size of transit with Wausau, that might be a good way to do it, because you could also then put in your maintenance as well. There's a way of tying each vehicle to, Google search, and where they are on their route, and designating where the route is, what time that normally they would be present or on their way to that spot for pickup. So, and from what my understanding, I didn't want to go into depth about it because I thought it's something with the commission decision, but it's primarily software-based, just requiring a computer in your offices. So I do think there's some cost-effective ways to get different riders be able to have this input of where the buses are, and doing some things that wouldn't cost us, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And because our fleet is so small, it just seemed like if we can tie this in by each bus being designated where it is on its spot, and also in the maintenance, it might be a good fit for Wausau. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm sure we will discuss this more when we get to the RFP, number 5. Okay, I see no more public comment. You don't see any hands, right, Greg? I'm at the side, so I can't see it as well. Okay. Number 3 is approval of minutes, February 18th, 2021 minutes. They're in your packet. Any concerns? Go ahead.
I would move to approve. I think they are very clear and complete. The only comment I would have is in the future, it'd be nice to add in the time of adjournment. But otherwise, very good. Felt like I was there all over again.
Second the motion.
Near midnight.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
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 And that has passed. Now, number 4, discussion and possible action on bus capacity limits.
I provided you a little summary in my memo. I would like to confirm that raising the limit was a good thing for our operations.
I don't think your mic is on.
Check, all right. I would confirm that raising the limit was a good thing for our operations, first of all. We have seen an influx of riders when school started with their new model. We are at capacity on a number of routes. We've added an additional bus over and above what we would normally operate in the morning, and then one in the afternoon at some pinch points. And we're able to float that bus between several routes in order to take off, to alleviate the crowding. So far, we're managing with that. We are a bit concerned about parent fatigue. We're seeing long lines at schools, and we're concerned that parents are going to become fatigued and want to get their kids on the bus again. And the warm weather may produce higher ridership as well. Our concern is that we don't have the resources really to do much more than we are currently doing. We have a number of bus operator vacancies currently. Our fleet size has shrunk a bit as we've had to take an older vehicle out of service. And there are a number of days during the week where we just don't have spares to react. So that is the status at this point. I'm not looking for a change necessarily, but I knew that this was an issue that you were willing to meet in short order to address if it were a problem. At this point, we're managing as is. Any questions?
Thank you, Greg. I was just going to say, how many vacancies are we having as bus drivers now, and what's your timeline of, is it something that you're looking to have all the vacancies filled before fall for school?
We have been recruiting for bus operator for months and months. We had negotiated a contract in the lead up to 2020, and we thought we had addressed our entry-level salary. In fact, we eliminated the entry-level salary step and started hiring at the second step, and that became the initial hiring salary in the new contract. We got 3 candidates after we posted that. We hired all 3, and we were fully staffed at the time. Since then, we've had some turnovers and retirements, and we continue to post the position, but we're not getting candidates. So this isn't a matter of we're not getting the right candidates, we're not getting candidates. I don't know what we're going to do. It is our desire to fill these positions, but we're just not attracting applicants.
Since so much of the transit is based on federal funding, I would think this would be a good time for the city HR to really reach out to the different communities and minority newspapers or radio as such, so that we can make sure that we are really getting the word out for those that may not necessarily And in fact, I no longer read the newspaper. I haven't for a couple of years. So it may be something that's just really getting the word out, especially because we do have federal funding. And I would think the city outside of the police department and one person in IT and one in engineering is very few minorities with city employment. So I would think that we should encourage reaching out in different ways and maybe some radio spots or the Hmong newspaper or some other family type of newsletters as a way to get the word out more. Thank you.
Yeah, the challenge with this position is that we hire to part-time. We don't have full-time employment available because of the seasonal nature of the work. This is primarily during the school year. And so we struggle to have, just like Yellow Bus struggles to hire people to this position. We made the contractual adjustment and we thought we solved it. Since then, the wage for Yellow Bus has increased and they're offering a signing bonus. So I think this is a sign of the times. It's become an arms race of sorts. And yes, we will be working with HR to see if we can come up with some creative solutions, because this is critical.
Greg, do you have any kind of projection or timeline as to when you might be ready to further increase bus capacities?
Well, I would like to get our bus operators vaccinated.
That hasn't happened yet?
That has not happened. I just checked with the health department today, and instead of waiting for something to be organized, they suggested that they go on their own to locations around town. And so that's what we'll start to do. But until they're vaccinated, I'm comfortable where we are.
Do you know if all of them are willing to be vaccinated?
We don't know. We don't know. One of the challenges, though, is that all of the vaccinations are available only online, signing up online, and not all of our employees are adept at that. So we will be assisting them.
Certainly, yeah. Yeah, I don't know, I just heard the other day that there was some talk about that the 6-foot limit might be lowered in schools to 3 feet.
Yeah, I check on that fairly regularly to see if there's an update and listen to what peers are doing. You know, we've polled peers before. We did so before the last meeting. And some have no capacity limits at all at this point. Some have not had capacity limits from the beginning. I wouldn't have been comfortable with that. I'm certainly comfortable where we are now. I wish the guidance would change from the CDC is what I wish. I too saw the 3-foot possibility. That would be helpful.
If the people are vaccinated, if the staff.
If the people are vaccinated,
Yeah.
correct.
Okay,
So,
very good. So you're about to start pushing on that, getting the shots thing.
yep, we'll assist our people and we'll see if we can get that accomplished. I was really hoping for a more centralized effort so that we could, it's very difficult for us to just excuse people to go for a vaccine, bus operators specifically, because somebody's going to take over and drive. So in order to schedule these things, with everyone scheduling on their own, it will be a challenge to get everyone through this process. As I said, I was hoping that we'd maybe have a workplace vaccination or a central location where we could kind of platoon people and get them through the process over a couple days. It doesn't sound like that's going to occur.
Thank you.
Greg, may I just, I mean, I suppose I could tell you after the meeting, but I would consider these, call the Aspirus business number, and I can help you get that. that seems to, at least you're talking to somebody in occupational health about, and maybe explain the situation. And maybe they, there might be some accommodation. I know that's how, I got my vaccine and, I'm a frontline worker, I was 1A, but, Aspirus seems to be working instead of everybody seems to be trying to find those most at need before so maybe we could try it that way and see if there's some accommodation.
It's a good idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, whatever we can do to help. And I really hope that the bus drivers are ready to be vaccinated and are agreeable.
I hope so too.
Seems to be an issue with some places.
Greg, also try Young's Pharmacy. I called them and they said on Monday they might have availability for essential workers. So try the one on Bridge Street.
Okay.
But I was also told that you could call pharmacies and tell them they don't have a computer and people could help you sign up. I don't know if that's the case, but
We are about to find out.
yeah.
Okay, any other comments or concerns or questions on bus capacity limits? Oh, Greg, one more question. Are you getting any complaints from either parents or the school yet about the waiting a half hour?
No, we're not.
Okay.
When the first couple days, we had some communication problems where the students weren't understanding what was going on. And so there were some miscommunications and kids went home. And then we dealt with the parents and worked through it. We directed them to do something and they didn't understand was the real issue. And since those first couple days, we've not had any complaints at all.
Good. Great. Okay. Oh, go ahead.
I have one more question for you, Greg. I happened to be over by Happy Mac a couple of months ago, and there was a minority gentleman that knocked at the door where the bus was just right at 17th Avenue in that corner. But I don't think he knew about going in the back door or whatever, and the bus driver never opened it up. So is there some type of signing now on the side of the bus? So if there's infrequent people, would they know what to do?
No, there isn't signage. And we discussed doing that. The problem is that the driver generally assesses the mobility of the individual when they're pulling up, and they will generally pull up to the back door unless it's obvious that they need the ADA features in the front door. In this case, it was probably just a stop sign at that corner, and that's why he pulled up there.
Well, it's correct, and it just happened, I think,
Yep.
the young man was coming out from the shop and just went to the front of the bus, so that's
Yep.
why I was inquiring. Is there, for those that don't ride frequently, he might have thought, well, why didn't the bus driver open up the door and not understand?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and communicating this has been a challenge. We've had several people who had a disability, but it was not visible. And the driver, tried to assess it and didn't get it right. And we get a call, and we've had to work with those individuals to pass the word that, the customer is in need of, the ADA features, and then we fixed it after the fact. But it hasn't been a significant problem. It is just that whole communication issue at the front door is a problem when you're loading through the back door. And we're having issues. For instance, we ask that customers let us know when they're transferring downtown. That's important for the operator to know in case they're running late. They need to convey that to other routes. Well, because they're coming in the back door, we miss that. And so we struggled with how do we get them to come up and let us know. And I think we're working pretty effectively in resolving that. So it's worked. But communication when you're doing business through the back door away from the driver is an issue.
Okay, we're on to discussion and possible action on RFP for Transit Development Program.
In your packet is an RFP. We discussed at the last meeting hiring a consultant. Well, we had two separate discussions on hiring consultants. One was to address our technology needs and make recommendations and help us through the procurement of possible technology solutions. The other discussion we had was on hiring a consultant to address gaps we had in service. And when I asked questions about the scope of that project, what gaps are we talking about? Are we talking about service to the industrial park or service to surrounding municipalities or night service or all of the above? I think the resounding consensus was all of the above. And so after the meeting, Dave Mack and Andy Lynch and I talked about the scope of an RFP, what would that look like? And we concluded that it looked an awful lot like the process we go through every 5 years, which is the Transit Development Program RFP process. And so that's what we've provided for you today. So when we do the transportation or transit development program, we ask a consultant to come in and evaluate existing services, take a look at what gaps might exist, reach out to stakeholders in the community to get their input regarding those gaps, and also, their interest in possible service in those areas. And we ask them to put a plan together for us to address the gaps that they find. As I said, we do this every 5 years. The document before you will look remarkably similar to the document we did in 2012. That was the last time we hired a consultant to do this. The framework of this, what we're asking them to do, is nearly identical to what we've asked for in the past. So this is not a revolutionary process. It's what we do every 5 years. We did this 4 years ago, and the focus of that plan was somewhat different. We decided at the time that we knew what the gaps were, and the challenge that we faced was not identifying gaps, it was selling our service to surrounding municipalities, because that was the biggest gap. And so, unlike any other study I've been involved with, we polled community members from all of the surrounding municipalities to gauge their interest in service. We wanted to essentially go past the elected officials and talk with the people. And what we concluded in that study was that there was interest in all of the surrounding municipalities in the service, in our urban area. Unfortunately, identifying the demand of the citizens has not been sufficient for us to get service to those communities, because ultimately we need to deal with the elected officials in those communities. I don't know what the answer to that is. Maybe the next consultant we hire can help us with that. But we've reached out to stakeholders, to businesses, to agencies, to surrounding municipal elected officials in other TDPs. This one will do the same thing. I would also add that this one is a little different in that we added another task to the playlist, and that is we want the consultant to take a look at technology needs. Consultants deal with transit systems all the time on these sorts of projects. As long as we have them on board, we would like to tap into their expertise and maybe get a twofer here and deal with both of the consultant initiatives that we talked about at the last meeting. So that is the proposal. The price tag that we've estimated, based on what our past experience and conversations we've had with the Wisconsin DOT, they gave us a range of between $60,000 and $120,000. I talked about the technology study separately. and included, and we think that that would put us at the top of the range if we included that separate task. So we're estimating 120,000. Now, of course, they will propose a price to us, but that is what we've set as the upper limit.
I have a question. Do they have to write a proposal for you to select who's going to do this, this plan? Does each agency have to come up?
The various consultants will write a proposal in response to this RFP.
Okay,
They will propose, they will follow the format we've set up for them, and they will write a proposal as to how they're going to address our RFP, and they will provide us with their proposed cost. Now, we've set criteria in here as to how we're going to select the consultant. That's a federal requirement. In an RFP, you have to, if it's not based on price, you have to specify what the criteria are so they know, and that is spelled out in here. If you've looked through the document, there is a timeline in here as to when we estimate tasks will be completed along the way. But we're also going to have to rely on the consultant that we hire as they walk through this. Because of the time frame that we're looking at, there are some significant challenges here. One is data. We're going to provide them with recent data that is not going to be very meaningful because we're in the middle of a pandemic. Ridership is depressed. It is atypical data. I'm not sure what they're going to do with that. Looking at peers will be helpful, but, their data is suppressed just like ours. I assume they're going to have to look at trends that occurred before the pandemic. The other challenge, we're asking for an onboard survey. We've done that in every 5-year plan that we've done. We survey our own riders. That will be a challenge. So we may have to be flexible in how the consultant carries out these activities. We'll learn more when we get a consultant on board. We'd also like the consultant to be creative in how they gather other public input. Obviously, we want public input from other than just our own riders, but from people in the community. That may be a challenge in the middle of a pandemic. So this will be an interesting project. Dave and Andy and I had a discussion about timing. Is this good timing or is this bad timing? I suspect there are going to be a lot of transit systems who are going to be looking to do some planning coming out of this. It may be good that we're on the front end. On the other hand, there's that data issue and the gathering the data during these, challenging conditions. So we'll see how that goes.
If I may, I was very pleased to see that you had huddled with Dave and Andy and you came up with this. I thought that was very good, and it's great that your office has that relationship with those gentlemen, and that everybody's kind of looking out for us. On the RFP itself, I think Supervisor Harris had a good suggestion at asking about funding options. Would they provide that insight without our asking, or should we write that in at some point?
Well, we have specified that their proposals have to be financially constrained, and that's a federal requirement. They can't promise us the sun, the moon, and the stars. Their proposals have to be feasible in terms of funding. So that is a normal process, and it is quite possible that they're going to be relying on us to talk about what our funding mechanisms are. And I would expect if they want to sell the plan, they're going to identify other possibilities, a UPass, for instance.
So that conversation is going to take place whether we write in that requirement or not.
Well, it's going to have to take place because I'm going to flat out tell them that we don't have sufficient funding for existing.
Very good.
So it's a problem.
It'll happen then.
Yes. The reason we are where we are is in large part because of lack of available funding and lack of available partners. So the two areas that they're going to have to focus on in order to develop a viable plan are funding, sustainable funding, and partners. So those stakeholder relationships, those stakeholder outreach efforts are going to have to be meaningful, and they're going to have to help us identify funding.
Greg, I have a number of questions and comments. I understand this. I was a bit disappointed in the timeline. We're looking at ending in June of 2022. I've been on this transit commission for quite a few years, and things are getting worse. I've had people come to me in the last month that are working with the homelessness task force asking me, how can I get help with transportation issues? I think Supervisor Harris is hitting something that I talked about with this officer, in that we may need to look at public-private partnerships. I don't know, I mean, you need to tell me, how do we fit that in? Does this fit into this, or do we need a smaller scope, in a smaller scale, kind of consultant work, looking at a couple of issues that are very important now, instead of the entire fixed bus route? I worry reading this that we're kind of in a cycle of, how can we increase our ridership? We can't go here. Okay, then how do we increase out there? We can't. Is there something else we can seize upon with with some kind of other thing that may not even end up with Metro Ride? I don't know. But my concern is that this is going out to June of 2022. I understand we're in a pandemic, but I don't know. There was that talk about the micro transit, or I think that's what it was called. And it doesn't have to be that, but I'd like to get others' input into, this is a big scale, big thing that needs to be done. Do we, as a commission, or do we go to the city council, or do we go to Marathon County Board and say, we are looking for, this is an urgent issue in our community. Can we, get something smaller scope that will look at those, kind of drill down those points of how we can get together as a county, as a city, with the other municipalities, with the industrial park, to get people to work, to get people to the grocery, store, or to Red Mountain. I don't know, maybe that's not possible, but I'd like to discuss it a bit more, because I don't know. Like I said, I'm hearing from other people, this is an issue now, and it's getting worse. People are falling through the cracks, and I don't know if a TDP is going to work, or do we just say, well, we're going to do this, and we'll maybe have some answers in June of 2022. I don't know. Maybe that I just need to hear from others and what they think.
All right, thank you, Becky. For me, I guess in talking about the microtransit, it seems like it's, are you really talking about like a shuttle service that would be a bus that could hold maybe 20 people or something, to get people out to the industrial park and work with different business partners to have something available for a schedule? I guess for the proposal, I do think we have to be very frank of where we're at for the pandemic, as well as in the past years, and that, and hopefully have consultants that have worked with communities similar size or similar routes type of thing, that having lived in Chicago back in the 80s, I mean, they're like grade A. And long routes where basically, you know, our routes are 15 minutes and then they come back. And now we have so many buses, and I think we can quantify how many miles we're doing as a loop per se, but we're really quite small. And having comparisons to bigger communities like Milwaukee or Eau Claire or whatever is not going to help us. So I think we need to target more on getting consultants that can work with our size. But I do feel that in some ways, I've heard from a few different residents that just say, well, it's really just for the convenience for the schools, for the buses, and those people with disabilities. And it's not, the general public just doesn't see it as a need. A couple of years ago, I had a car that broke down, and my other car wasn't available for 3 months, so in the fall, I took public transportation as much as I could. I happened to live in a hilly area, so when I had to go back home, it's like I was going up 10 stories in 2 blocks, huffing and puffing, just because of the hilly area that I'm living in. And and I guess I can see as getting older as a senior, I'm not there yet, but that at a certain point, it may not be worth my while to be having a car. But it just seems the way the community is built, it's expecting that you have a car available. Employers are expecting that. I also wanted to mention that I think it's like a year and a half to 2 years ago now that I ended up attending the Weston meeting about TIFs, and that it ended up, they were talking about, they have as much concerns about transportation, of encouraging people, and even like recruiting people from the Philippines that I think does have a lot of, in the nursing education area, and wanting to come over. But what are they going to do when they get to Weston? How are they going to get to work? So there's some other communities looking at it, but I do think they're probably worried, well, is Wausau going to want to pay more than our fair share? And so we're going to have to deal with those issues. But I think we need to really focus on very specific information about our community so that we're not getting a big proposal that does not really target what our community needs are. We are not going to become a Chicago. We're not going to become an Appleton that I see for maybe 50 years or more. So let's be realistic and give them that information so that we can target consultants that would help us. But I do think the shuttle or microtransit probably needs to be a separate issue, because it's, otherwise we're going to get tied up into too much information, and I think it's going to involve more of this kind of community outreach with these other communities, and there still is that need. Thank you.
Can we use CARES money for a quick turnaround study or consultant view on microtransit? So we don't have to, I mean, and I guess the other question, do you see that the time span for completion of this thing, the June of 2022, is that fairly normal, or can we accelerate that?
I asked Dave to put together the schedule, so he can answer that probably better than I can.
Okay, Mr.
Madam
Mack.
Chair, this is Dave Mack. I can address that if you'd like. And I can make a couple other comments that might answer some of the questions that have been raised so far. First off, this is traditionally, to Pat's point, the timeline is very similar to what projects like this would go through and has gone through in the past. There is a process. It's dictated by federal, state standards that we go through, and so we've got to make sure that we hit all the points that we need to in order for this to become a successful project and still follow along with those regulations that we must follow. So the timeframe is definitely the same probably anywhere else you would go. You're in a study like this, you're probably going to be looking at about a year's worth of time to get somebody on board, have them collect the data, have them do the public outreach components, and then create the recommendations, bring them to the commission and to the city council and even to the MPO commission for their review before everything gets finalized. So there's definitely a process in place that we have to go through. If I may just make a comment about the comments about a quicker version of this to look at specifically the microtransit issue. From my perspective, I think that what looking at the microtransit component does is it identifies a solution before you have all of the facts about what the needs are. There's been a lot of talk about we need to fill the gaps. We need to figure out what those gaps are. We need to find out who the stakeholders are, what their needs are. And if we automatically do a study to take us right to what a microtransit system might give us, we may be missing out on opportunities of other types of services that we may be able to provide by looking at too narrow of a focus. And so I understand that a year is a long time to get things done for this particular study. But I also know that based on the federal regulations that we have, we will be back a year from now talking to you about having to do this same study. And it may not make sense to have two consultants being hired within a span of maybe a year or two to collect and go through all the data and do the same work over again. Because of our 5-year time frame to do the TDPs, we will be contracting with somebody probably during the year of 2022 anyway. And so this was one of those concepts that came up that we kind of married the needs that the city has right now with the needs that we have through the federal process to create the TDP in our timeline. So it was advantageous to talk to Madison DOT and get their funding source set up for us to be able to do this now. We're not sure if some of those funds will be available next year. So the timing may be right to be able to tackle a lot of things that the city wants to tackle in looking at the system during the course of this year. Thank you.
So the larger study would look at microtransit as one of the possibilities?
If I may, I think that they would, and I think that between Greg and Andy and I, in working with the consultants on this project, we would be able to help them, kind of help steer them in directions that you would like to see go in. I know that as part of the process, they will be addressing the Transit Commission in the beginning of the process to get your feelings on what you want them to work on. We've kind of set up a framework for what they should be doing, but if your ideas want to be focused on at least taking a good hard look at what a microtransit system could look like in the area, then that's the direction that we're going to choose to have them go down. But I don't want to, I caution you to not go so focused with a study that you miss out on the potential for other advice that a consultant can bring to us. And then they will be tailoring the needs that we have, or their comments and their recommendations to the Wausau size, if you will. Our metro area is is similar in size with other metro areas in the country, and that's the kind of information that these other consultants can bring to us, is what's happening out there in the world that we're not aware of, that may be working somewhere else.
Thank you.
This is Kathy. I think the study is a good thing, but I think we have to let them look at it and be open to their ideas and not specifically say microtransit. Maybe they have some other idea. I think we need to be open to whatever possibility they come up with, and maybe it will be microtransit. You know?
This is Jen. So question, I mean, would it be asking too much to break this into two pieces with some part of what we're asking from the consultant to be submitted sooner, and then like the lower priority or I guess less urgent things to be completed at a later time? So if we're asking for like solutions to gaps in service now, like maybe we could have an earlier completion date for that, and then the remaining tasks by a different date. Is that completely out of the wheelhouse?
Madam Chair, this is Dave. I can respond to that. The timeline is created and the tasks are set up kind of sequentially. And the beginning tasks are the data collection and the public engagement process with, getting a hold of the stakeholders in the community, which in my mind is probably one of the biggest components of this whole project, is going to be really looking at the community and doing an assessment of what the needs in the community are and getting those stakeholders involved in the conversations with the consultant. That timeline, if I remember right, takes us all the way through the fall of this year, maybe towards the end of the year, before some of those things are done. It's hard to skip some of those. We can't really get to the solutions of what a microtransit system could look like if we don't have the data and that public input behind us to start working with to come up with the recommendations. And so I think from my perspective, it's kind of hard to break that up. You're going to need that upfront work by the consultants to do before they can come up with their recommendations.
I was going to ask, is there any way that we can get data from the different taxis or shuttle services or limos to find out what kind of other things that they're doing as part of our looking at the whole transportation issue? Because I do think in some instances, like in Chicago, they have the limousine limited licenses, but that allows them to go outside the county and to long distance, that we may not have all the information that we need if we don't have this information of like the cost of going to the Central Wisconsin Airport, that I think a number of the taxis are offering those kind of services. And eventually in Chicago, back when they finished the subway back in the late 80s, they were able to do that so that it did take away some business from taxis. But I guess I'm just not sure how the city handles that area. Does the city handle the licenses for the taxis and the limos, and can you get some of that data?
Public Health and Safety approves licenses for taxis, but they're private companies, and they are not, I don't think, beholden to us to give that information. I mean, I know their rates because I deal with taxis in my other position, getting them for people, and it's $5 to get in and $1 a mile. So I don't know if people know where I live. I live in Riverview on Ashland Avenue. To get somebody from there to the UWSP is $11. And that's an issue for our people with disabilities, seniors, and everybody. I mean, it's, how can we get somebody a job at, $9 an hour and they're paying $23 a day in taxi services? And that's not even a long ways away. So that is why it's crucial, and how much does a taxi take to go to Rib Mountain? Think about, a mile isn't very long anymore. So, you think about that. That is why I'm getting a lot of calls and a lot of, residents and different advocacy groups and, employers are worried about, I can't get anybody because, that they can't get here on time because of this or because of that, or they can't afford a taxi. So, it does affect the entire community and how, and our growth and how we treat people, of all aspects of life. And so, it's my bully pulpit, and I understand we've tried and we've, not had a lot of success with our stakeholders in other communities and things, but I think I'm all for this TDP. My issue is, I think we are coming to an kind of a crossroads where we really need some answers, and I guess I would like us to be part of the solution. I think people will start going around us, and I don't know how that works, for how that's going to end up with our health of our transit system. If we have stakeholders and private entities deciding we're going to go around public transit. I mean, we need those riders as well. So that's my other concern, is that the health of this transit system, and if we, don't come up with some answers or don't at least appear to be looking for them, the talk in the community is that, well, we'll just do it ourselves. And I worry about what that will look like as well.
I just, do you mind if I sound off? I unfortunately have another meeting, of course, but I just want to sound off on this. I think it's really critical that we get this right. I think this is good long-term planning, but sometimes you have to do some sprints while you're doing the marathon, while you're training. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to capture some quick, like executive summary style stuff from the data collection or whatever this is, or maybe we just need to have two different things going at the same time from the same group. I don't know what it is. I feel urgency about this. I hear from people every day who are trying to get to wherever they are. They don't drive. They have a handicap maybe, or whatever it is. And I just think that we are a city in 2021, and this is part of the services we give. And maybe we need to innovate. Maybe that isn't microtransit. Maybe that's something else. But I don't know what that is. Like, my goal here is, like, I want to help more people get to where they need to go. And whatever their ability, whatever it is, I want more of that for people, and not less. I'm afraid that if we followed on the same path we've done for however long, that it's going to lead us in the same direction. And I think now is the time to pivot and look at what we can do. I think that we'll be getting. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I think, with the funding, with whatever it is, like we gotta think. And we got to be innovative, and I wish I had the right answers for all of this, but.
So Greg, is this an action item, or is this a information item only?
No, I intended it to be an action item. We wouldn't move forward unless you approved us to do so. As Dave said, we would do this next year. Our thought was we'd move it ahead a year. If that's not your desire, then we wouldn't move forward.
What's your pleasure, Commission?
I think we should take advantage of the opportunity to at least move this ahead a year, as these gentlemen have worked out. And without stepping on that, I'm kind of feeling like the mayor is also, it would be nice if we could somehow learn more about maybe with private entrepreneurs or something to get something more going on with microtransit. But I guess the first thing we need to do is to get this main thing going. So I would move to approve that, and I think that with the assurance from the director that financial funding options are going to be part of it, I would move to approve that, and then maybe we could talk about some look at, enticing private enterprise to fill in some of those microtransit gaps.
I'll second the motion to move forward on this plan.
Any other questions, concerns?
Sorry, this is Jen Bizzotto again. Quick question, it says in the proposal that 80% of the funding would have been covered if this had moved forward next year as originally planned. And my question is, would that number have been higher if it were later? Like, where is that coming from?
Planning funds are generally, state planning funds, I guess it's a mix of state and federal, generally cover 80% of the cost. So regardless of whether we do it now or whether we do it next year, I think the cost share is the same. Is that correct, Dave?
Yes, the cost share typically is the same, and like Greg said, the numbers are a mix of state and federal dollars. One of the things that we do know is that they've identified that we can obtain those funds right now during the course of this year. I can't guarantee that those funds would be available next year based on maybe other systems in the state looking to do some planning work and identifying those funds to them, and we might miss out. It's one of those things where I know Madison has always got some money around somewhere at Madison DOT, but this is kind of one of those situations where it would be nice to be able to move forward knowing that we actually have the funds available right now.
So I guess, I'm sorry, let me just ask a quick follow-up question. I'm sorry, I cut somebody off. So my concern was like, are we leaving any money on the table by doing this a year early? So moving forward with this is the same in terms of funding now as it would be next year, with the difference, I guess, that then the next planned redo of this wouldn't happen for 6 more years instead of 5 because we're doing it a year early. So is that really the only net impact here?
If I can answer that, actually, whenever you create the document, you start the next 5-year cycle again. So you're not just adding another 6 years because we're a year early. We would move 5 years from whenever this plan is complete. But also, from my experience, every year you go further into the future, the more expensive the consultant costs become. And really what we've set up here is a budget of a cap of $120,000. They will be proposing to us a cost to do this project, and hopefully a number of them will come in below that 120 number. And so that's part of our calculation of who we choose does have a cost component, but it won't be, we won't exceed the 120,000. But next year, it could be more like 150,000. So, that's where we rely on the state DOT's expertise on where we think the consultant costs would fall during the course of this year, and that's why the numbers are set up the way they are.
Thank you for that explanation. I mean, I guess what I'm hearing is that we're getting a steal of getting this information a year earlier than we wouldn't have, and that there's not necessarily a downside except, like, I'm Will Harris's point is well taken, and Becky's too, that we want solutions now, but this seems to be getting solutions sooner. And it's, I mean, I guess like I'm leaving this meeting thinking, you know, I'll vote for this proposal and great, but that's not to stop us from being like, what can we be doing in the meantime? So I guess that's where I'm at here of like Supervisor Harris's point is very well taken. We definitely should be brainstorming shorter term solutions, but I guess I don't see these as in competition necessarily. So thank you for all of these great explanations. It's really helpful.
Madam Chair, if I may, this is Dave again. I just wanted to make another comment. I know Mr. Harris was part of conversations that we had at the MPO level in the last month or so. And even yesterday, we had at the county, our Transportation Coordinating Committee had a discussion about transportation and the policy of transportation at the county level. And it seems to me, in talking about this over the last months that we have a number of entities now that are starting to look at having discussions with stakeholders and trying to bring the community together on what the needs of transit is in our area. And I think this consultant study could be the catalyst to kind of bring that all together. If we have members of the MPO sitting in with conversations with the consultant, along with you from the Transit Commission, members of the county involved, I think that'll help bring this a stronger plan together. If we have all of the people that are looking to work on something like this come together and work with this consultant at the same time, then we're not running off in different directions as well, and we can have a concerted effort. Thanks.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go forward with this action on getting the RFP out for the Transit Development Program. So all in favor say aye.
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 And that passes. I do hope, I do hope, Greg, maybe we can talk about next month, about talking about what we're thinking, and maybe we'll do that and just kind of brainstorm and see what you think, okay?
Sure. If I could add, just comment. I think one of my biggest frustrations is getting my arms around these gaps that are out there. We hear anecdotally of gaps that exist, that there's demand out there. Dave and Andy and I have had one heck of a time trying to get people to the table to participate in that. You know, as I said before, we do this plan every 5 years, and we try to get stakeholder input from the business community, from agencies, we've tried it any number of ways, and we cannot seem to get people to come forward to say, here's what the gap is. Here's what you could do for my business. And I'm still at a loss to understand how we do that. I'm hoping this consultant will be more innovative and will help us get at that. But from a provider perspective, in order to solve the problem, we have to kind of get our arms around what the problem is. Where's the gap? How many people are we talking about? And then find a solution. I wish there were a way that we could round up the agencies and try to get our arms around what does that demand look like. Again, I hear anecdotally, but not consistently, that there are gaps. I would like to hear from the agencies that deal with these people who are affected by a lack of transportation, what those gaps are, and that would help us move toward dealing with it. But so far, we've been unsuccessful in getting those folks to the table. So if you've got ideas as to how we could round up the support, that seems to me to be a significant gap.
Well, Greg, I will just tell you that I'm in the process of working with Officer Limerand, and we are going to do exactly that.
Great.
I said, I knew this is before this even came out, I knew this was going to be a long haul no matter where it came from. And I think that I said we need to do a two-prong approach. And so I think, I will certainly be an active part of that in trying to find, the gaps, as you said, and maybe I can get somebody from DVR and and I will, the advocacy groups. And see, I'll use my bully pulpit with whomever I can, and maybe we just have some quasi kind of meeting.
It would be great to have some sort of agency summit where we focus on transportation and try to get everybody kind of moving in the same direction.
Okay.
I agree with Greg. I just had a conversation with someone today at neighbor's place. I won't say what agency, but they were complaining about people not being able to get to jobs because of no transportation. And I said, where are you at the table coming and advocating for transit? It's getting them agencies and businesses and chambers and everyone at the table is critical in this survey.
Well, I would also mention too, what kind of going after what Kathy and Becky had said, that there's like a regular housing coalition or a group that works on minority issues that come together on a regular basis. It's a question of getting the word out to them. We are a chamber member, so we could have some other information, I guess, highlighted in chamber or flyers and such to get the word out to the community as well. But I think it's kind of been an afterthought in the past by maybe some other advocacy or case managers that you pretty much may not be able to change the transit system. And so it's kind of been overlooked, and that we do have a large student population. But I think if we really get the word out and that how important this is for our future, I do think we can make it a local summit. Thank you.
United Way may be another
Yes.
source as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we're on to Transit Director's Report.
I put the American Rescue Plan Act on the agenda. That's the next round of stimulus, hoping that I would have information to share with you, and unfortunately, I don't. I've read through the transportation funding portion of the bill, and I haven't been able to make much sense of it. In Wisconsin, these funds tend to come to the state in what's called a governor's apportionment, and then the state statute determines how it will be distributed. The last stimulus, the CARES Act, was awarded to Wisconsin in that way. So they use the bill itself to determine how much goes to Wisconsin, but then the actual distribution and who gets what is determined by the state. So I'm not sure if it'll play out that way. In this case, WISTOT has not provided any sort of information whatsoever. So we're kind of in a wait-and-see pattern. And that's all I know.
Okay. Thank you for that. And so then we're at the end of our agenda, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn from Jen Bizotto.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Thank you.